Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again. I'm Martin Ballard and welcome to episode 72 of this podcast series and to Beauty and the Beast, the latest in our occasional series looking at popular pantomime titles.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, we looked at the role of the producer in more detail with Imagine's joint CEO, Steve Bowden, and associate producer, Laura Taylor. Don't forget, if you missed that or any of the other previous episodes, you can, of course, still listen to them. And there are many more to come as well from one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre. And don't forget as well, if you have any questions about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general, send them in using the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk, and we'll answer one of your questions later on in this episode. Well, this time I've been joined by Imagine's artistic director, Eric Potts, and Scottish actor, presenter and comedian, Liam Dolan, for the next in our occasional series looking at the most popular pantomime titles. And this time, as I mentioned, we're turning our attention to Beauty and the Beast. So, Eric, first of all, welcome back.
Hi, Martin. Lovely to be here.
And lovely to speak to you, Liam, finally.
Lovely to speak to you too, Martin. Hello.
So, first of all, Liam, I've got to ask you about your panto season over Christmas 23-24. Another bumper year for you.
It was absolutely incredible. It was so nice to be back in the Pavilion Theatre. But the difference this year, obviously, is that the building has been brought over by Trafalgar Entertainment and the pantomime produced by Imagine. So it was just great because it was nice to be back working with a team that I'd worked for a long time back in Kilmarnock, but also it was lovely to be working. I'm not just saying this because he's listening in, but it was lovely to be working finally with Eric Potts.
Well, welcome home. That's all I can say, Liam. Welcome back to the Imagine family.
It's great to be back. Thank you. I'm loving it.
Okay, Eric, let's start with the story and the roots of the story behind Beauty and the Beast, because its origins are in France. I think it was first published back in 1740, which I was staggered by because that predates the Brothers Grimm fairy tales by a good 50 years or so.
Yes, it does. I mean, it was written, as you say, in France, La Belle et la Bête. And the original tale was very long, probably lasted as long as the curse placed on poor prince. So there were several rewrites and adaptations which shortened what was quite an intricate and elongated tale down to roughly what we know it to be today. But yeah, originally written by Gabriel Suzanne Babot de Villeneuve, which is equally long, but as you say, very early. And then there were all sorts of versions which were picked from that, or perhaps more accurately from the shortened version of that tale later on in the 1800s, which were then rewritten for regional influences. There's one of the most prolific fairy tales, which has taken, there's a Russian version called The Scarlet Flower. There's versions all over the world, American and French, of course, originally. It's very popular and very big in Italy as well. So it's got all sorts of versions, depending where in the globe you actually read it.
I guess the major change in terms of its pantomime life came when it was Disney-fied, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But what is so magical, do you think, Liam, about the story of Beauty and the Beast? Why does it work in so many ways, whether it be book, film, or pantomime?
I think because it's a classic story, and it's got everything in it. It's the ultimate story for everyone, I think, because it's got the beauty, the beauty part for the girls and the lovely princess and the lovely big iconic, dress when she comes to the ball ground and all that stuff. And then it's got your baddies in it, but it's got the prince, it's got the beast. It's love, it's hate, it's people that can watch the show that think, they've either suffered some sort of negative comments from people, peers in schools, the way that the beast is kind of betrayed to be and nobody likes him and things like that. So I think what it has is I think it ticks every box of classic story, love story, adventure, fun, desire, all these things. So I think that's what brings Beauty and the Beast to be such a popular story.
There is an adventure in it. That's crucial to a pantomime, isn't it?
100%, because you watch it and you know what you want from the audience's point of view. And I've seen it a couple of times and been in it actually a couple of times. The audience know what they want. They want the best for the beast. They want this love story to happen. They want, and Belle's so beautiful, and it goes against the grain of stereotypes that she's going to fall in love with this beast character. And it's that kind of don't judge the book by its cover and things like that.
Eric, from a director's point of view, or writer for that matter, it's got certain unique elements. I mean, I think the interesting twist with this is that anybody who doesn't know the story would immediately think the Beast is the baddie. Of course, he's not.
This is it. It's almost along the lines of Mother Goose, in that our prince ultimately is the hero, but goes through the central phase of the story where he is regarded as the baddie. So he's a bit of a false flag there. You then have the addition over the years, various different versions of a sort of half baddie in the form of the arrogance of the what we will call the Gaston character, who is the one that tries to secure Belle or Beauty's love. So he in theory is the baddie, but because of his behavior, because of his appearance, his status, it's the prince a la Beast that is regarded as the baddie, until of course he gets transformed back, and then immediately, strangely enough, everyone loves him again. So it's a bit of an odd one.
Yeah, the dynamics are certainly different, aren't they, Liam? And you haven't got baddie coming on stage left and being booed in quite the same way. The sort of margins, the lines drawn between good and evil are a bit blurred at times.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's why the audience love it as well, because you take them on a journey of surprise, because they're going against the grain of, as you said, Martin, tradition with the goodies and the baddies. You kind of watching it as an audience member, I think you're a little bit confused because you go, everybody's loving this Beast and feel sorry for the Beast, but he's grotesque and doesn't look, the way that the Gaston character looks. Because if you look at the thing, the statistics would tell you that the Beauty is going to fall in love with Gaston. They're both good-looking people. He's really muscly, he's big, he's beautiful, and all that kind of stuff. And the Beast is obviously not. And I think that's why people are surprised on that journey when they go, oh, hang on, this is the person we're supposed to be liking, and these are the people we're supposed to be loving and hating.
We've spoken in the past, haven't we, about the sort of big magical sequence, be it a transformation of one thing or another, maybe the cave or the flying carpet in Aladdin, obviously the transformation into going to the ball in Cinderella. In Beauty and the Beast, I think the closest thing to that is probably the transformation of the Beast back to the prince, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think it's a tricky one because in theory you have two transformations. First of all, the prince going into the Beast when the curse is placed by the enchantress, and then the big one, I suppose, towards the end of the story, where good triumphs over evil. Belle has declared her love before the last petal of the enchanted rose falls, and the Beast transforms back into the prince. So that's a huge moment. But we found that the staging of our pantomime version over the year, while that is a significant moment, it's funny, it's the appearance of Belle in that dress that gets an equally big response from the audience. If you get that moment right, that is almost as significant as the transformation moment itself.
And Liam, how does it compare, as a performer to other pantomimes? How does it play?
Well, it's really interesting because when I did Beauty and the Beast in Kilmarnock I was looking this up today actually before we started, 2007 it was, and I remember we'd done Jack and the Beanstalk, we'd been Aladdin, Mother Goose, all these kind of things. I thought, I'm not sure if Beauty and the Beast is a panto, and I actually thought, I don't know if it's going to work. And I was totally wrong, because it totally, again, using the word transformation, it transformed my opinion of it, because you watch it and you think, this is brilliant, because the audience are already invested in a story that they already know. They know the story, they want to love it. They also know they've been to see other pantos, and they want to see how you combine and create that magic of putting the two together.
Now, we said, didn't we, at the very beginning, in fact, it's been a thread in all of these pantomime discussions, Eric, that it doesn't do any harm for pantos when a fairy tale is Disney-fied. I was staggered. I didn't know this, but apparently Walt Disney actually attempted, first of all, to make this into an animated feature back in the 1930s, had another go in the 1950s. And I wonder if Disney had got its hands on it earlier, whether Beauty and the Beast would have been a more popular pantomime title throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s and so on.
I think you're probably right. He obviously did Snow White was his first big feature release, and it had an incredible effect on the popularity of the tale and the accessibility of the tale. So you're right. If he'd managed to achieve one of these early versions, it would have certainly have been in public prominence to a greater extent than it had been until the 90s, when they finally got round to releasing the version with Mrs. Potts and the clock and the candelabra and everything that we know. But we always say it's good for the response to a panto if Disney has done a version, and that's very true. It certainly doesn't help. It doesn't do any harm, rather, at the box office. But I think people come with such strong ideas of what they're expecting to see because of the Disney version, the recent Disney version of this, although there has been a live action version filmed just a few years ago. People are expecting to see Lumiere and all the other characters, Chip and Mrs. Potts and all that, and that when they are not in the panto, they go, oh, hang on a minute, we have to think about this because this isn't what we're expecting, especially with Disney's live version still touring around the country on a regular basis. One of the last versions, of course, was with our lovely friend Sam Bailey playing Mrs. Potts very, very well. So this is a bit of an odd one. People are coming with very strong expectations of what they think Beauty and the Beast is. And when in our panto versions it isn't quite the same, doesn't have the same characters, people are not in any way disappointed, but they go, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't what we think the story is. So it's a bit of an odd one.
How do you get round the fact that, you've got a baddie, but you can't call him Gaston because that's the Disney copyright and so on. You can't probably use any, maybe one or two if you push, but you can't really use the music. The characters' names might all have to be different. How do you get round that? Because the expectation is there, but it is, of course, panto. It's not the Disney movie, is it?
Yeah, I think you get around it by kind of you create the characters that imagine, and that comes from Eric's script. It's evident that when you place them all together, that I think the audience buy into it. They come in, they know that you're not going to see, Chip and Mrs. Potts and the candelabra and Gaston and things. When that's already established from the beginning, you create the character. They still have the same demeanor, persona. So I think that's what the audience invest into that. So they can go, because they know the story of Beauty and the Beast so well and all the characters from, as Eric said, the touring production, the live animation, the original film. I think they look into it and go, right, so he's the character that we're supposed to be not liking because he's the one that fancies Bella, he's the one that's trying to kill the beast, or so I think it's easy as a story because you've already got the audience are coming in, although they don't see the actual characters and the people that they know from the movie and from the film, but they're coming in with a story in their head and they know who we portraying those characters to be on stage.
When you're writing any panto, but particularly something like Beauty and the Beast, which is a reasonably new pantomime in terms of its popularity anyway, you have to think about those things that people will expect from a pantomime, whether that be a dame or a fool of a comic, or whether that be a slosh scene or a ghost gag. How do you put those into a script of a story that doesn't feature them ordinarily?
It is a juggle. And it's interesting to hear Liam saying earlier on that he originally was a bit dubious about the title itself as a panto, because I was exactly the same first time I sat down to write it. And it's now, to be honest, become one of my favorites because you have such a strong through narrative and a well-known storyline, and then, as you say, in many ways it's the same as most pantos in that you have got your through story, your through adventure, be that a love story like Cinderella, or indeed Beauty and the Beast, or whether something more adventurous like Treasure Island, like we did at Pavilion last year, or Dick Whittington or something. You then hang all the panto ingredients off that, and it's about creating a strong enough story arc and finding the moments within that arc that you say, well, actually, that's a good point for our ghost gag. Or there's a good excuse there for our Dane character, which we've also slotted in, to need to do some cooking for a journey. Someone's going off on a journey. Oh, I'll make some cakes for the way, So you find the moments so that they're not just crowbarred in, but they actually sit justifiably within the story arc that everyone is hopefully enjoying, but everyone knows.
It's really important to make it happen as part of the story, the journey, the adventure. I think it's really odd, certainly as a performer and as an audience member, actually, because I've seen it happen when something's just shoehorned into the show with no relevance and no real reason, and you go, what is this happening for? Whereas certainly with Imagine, and who are fantastically brilliant at making the story the main core of the show, and Pantomime a classic. But the songs are put in, the music put in, the floss stains, the front cloths, they're all relevant to the story because we make that happen. And I think it's safe to say that everyone, myself included, are all passionate about that the story is key. So therefore, there's no point putting something in that's completely random that doesn't actually sit or make any sense. Whereas everything that will go into Beauty and the Beast, and the same with Treasure Island, as Eric said, and all the other pantos that I've done with Imagine, it's all so well crafted together that it all makes sense and it all flows really, really well.
Eric, what about the other demands of the show? I mean, we talked about, putting a dame and a comic in there, for instance. You can't necessarily add those and keep all of the characters in the Disney story, for instance, or in the book story for that matter. Belle's father, Gaston's sidekick. Obviously, you mentioned Lumiere, Cogsworth, and so on. You have to make some choices on which characters can stay, don't you?
Yes, indeed. And obviously you've got Belle or Beauty. You have the prince who is transformed into the beast. You have to have someone who facilitates that transformation. So that then becomes an enchantress. But it's a tricky one because you don't necessarily want another baddie doing that. So it has to be a fairy type character who is trying to teach the prince a lesson for his own good, so that you don't then create another baddie, because the prince is about to become, as we've discussed earlier, a baddie. We also have to keep the character, simply because he is so well known within certainly the Disney version, the Gaston character, the local arrogant. In my version, he's the village blacksmith who is trying to woo Beauty all the way through the tale without any luck. A spoiler alert there. And then you have to have another kindly voice within the village, as well as your dame character and your comic character, who can be friends of Belle within the village. But you also have to have her father, or at least a character that is similar to that. So you've got another voice. It's the father's journey that sort of instigates the whole interaction with the villagers, and certainly with Beauty, of course, because the father is trying to get a rose to take home to Beauty, and takes one from the beast's garden or the beast's gate and incurs his wrath. And then you have created that interaction between the two sets of characters. So you have basically what I call, when I'm writing, you have your story monitors, in this instance your Beauty, your prince, and your ethereal character, the enchantress. And then you have your comedy characters. You have your dame, you have your comic character, and you have, although he's not intentionally comedic, you have your Gaston character, who I call in my version, as it stands at the moment, it probably changed for the version we're doing in Glasgow this coming year. He's called Benedict Bourbon, the village blacksmith. He really takes the biscuit, and there if you want it. And he is a comedy character, but not intentionally. He's the one the audience love to hate. So again, you have, as you say, and as Liam said before, you have your characters that the audience are expecting to see, and then your extra pantomimic characters to help us on our particular version of the tale.
Now, obviously, set, props, costume, Liam, are all very important in terms of, what the audience sees in picture terms, but they fit that sort of bill of most pantomimes and most fairy tales, don't they? You've got a quaint village at the beginning and a castle, all the elements again that make panto work, and that transformation. It's almost as Eric was saying earlier, it's almost a Cinderella transformation for Belle, the Belle character, because she comes out in that beautiful dress later on. So again, all of these elements are still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Eric's completely right. When you get that transformation of Belle coming out in that beautiful dress, all these people in the audience, the girls are watching it going, I want to be in that dress. The mums are watching it going, that would be beautiful for a big event. And the guys are watching it going, she's absolutely stunning. So it's that pivotal moment when it comes in, that Belle's there. But I think the thing about the audience is it's familiarity. You're absolutely right, but also there's a trust there. They kind of look, they sit down and they go, they've been to Imagine Pantos before. If they've got cast returning, they sit down and they go, right, we're in safe hands here, because last year and the past couple of years and how many years they've been to see the show, they know that we've got this, and it doesn't matter whether it's going to be Beauty and the Beast, a story that they don't necessarily know all the story of, or The Little Mermaid, or any of these things. they go, right, this is going to be a good production because we've been to see it, and they will put on a fantastic show.
Liam, how popular do you think it is in comparison to some of the others? Because we always talk about, Cinderella, Aladdin, maybe being at the top there in terms of popularity. But how popular is Beauty and the Beast? And, does it need maybe a little bit more marketing than some of the others?
I think it's on its way to becoming, it was interesting when Eric said about had Walt Disney earlier on, in his career, produced that, and would it be more popular in one of the titles? But I think it's such a well-known story that kids can go and buy the book, they can go and watch the film, they can go and see it on tour, and whether they've done all three of them or none of them, they still know the classic story of Beauty and the Beast. So they're in safe hands by coming to see it, because, as I said, you mirror that with the panto-fied element of it and the classic story about the rose. You put a picture of a rose on Beauty and the Beast, and they go, oh yeah, that's that bit with the rose petal falls. Everybody knows that. So I think, as far as marketing is concerned, half the work's already done when you put the title on in the picture, because the audience invest into that.
Yeah, and in terms of the marketing, of course, like any pantomimes, to the larger venues in particular, Eric, the casting is important, isn't it?
Very much so. And I think certainly the version that we've got a few going out again this year. It's become a title that theatres are keen to get in their panto rotation. But the version that we're doing up in Glasgow at the Pavilion this year, we, of course, are writing it specifically. Liam and I are writing it together again, as we did Treasure Island last year, which I'm really looking forward to. And it is Beauty and the Beastie, of course, for the Glasgow audience. But as Liam said, at the top of the title treatment is the rose, the iconic rose, so people know the story from the word go. But it will be written specifically for the Glasgow audience. Chances are it's going to be set certainly in Scotland, if not Glasgow itself. So it's just a lifting of the traditional tale and a localization. And the good thing about the Pavilion, as with several of Imagine's venues across the country, is that there is a returning audience. I won't say too much, of course, but there's been an established core cast in Glasgow for several years now that the audience absolutely love. Liam being one of those, so it's a shame he won't be part of. Oh no, I'm joking. I'm joking. So it's immediately, and it kind of ties in with what Liam was saying, is that the audience know what they're going to get from a Pavilion panto. It's a tale that is going to be totally accessible for them as Scots and or Glaswegians, and it's going to be delivered by a core cast of performers that over the years they have really grown to love, and the fondness for that core cast, especially at the Pavilion, including Liam, is absolutely phenomenal, and it's really great. It's very similar to a regular Dame we had until very recently at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester. Just that warmth and that accessibility, and that trust, I think, was another word that Liam used, which I thought was great. The audience know exactly they are in safe hands.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head with something else that's really important. Again, it's something we've discussed many, many times, but Beauty and the Beast in Glasgow is not the same as Beauty and the Beast in Coventry or Leicester or London, because you have to localize it. Liam, in terms of its future, has it got a bright future, do you think, Beauty and the Beast?
100%. 100% in panto, because you're bringing the panto, you're combining, as I said earlier on, two classic stories, whether that's a pantomime story, your panto element, with Beauty and the Beast. And I think this is one that will become one of the most regular ones. And I know there's a lot of people that haven't seen it before, but people will come and see it. And interestingly, what Eric was just saying about the cast, you come out of stage door after doing Treasure Island and folk go, oh, can I get a picture, Buttons? And you go, well, they've been calling you Buttons for years and years and you haven't done it. But they still refer to you as that character because it's the same kind of character. And then they'll say things like, that was great, we really enjoyed it, we're coming back next year. This is before they know who's in it. This is before they know what the title is. But the loyalty and the trust, as I said again, is there. So they will come back and they will return. And that's brilliant. And I think even if, before they know it's Beauty and the Beast, or whether they don't know Beauty and the Beast as a story, they know that they're in safe hands and they will return. So I think, in answering your question, Beauty and the Beast will become one of the most popular panto titles around the country.
It's obvious that society is changing, and so are society's values. It's well documented that some pantos will have to change because of criticism of things like racial and gender stereotypes as the genre itself continues to evolve. But in many ways, Beauty and the Beast bucks the trend in that respect, doesn't it? Apart from anything else, it has a very strong female protagonist.
It is. In many ways, Belle is that strong female character that we are looking to insert in other pantomimes where that isn't the case. Belle stands as a strong, very independent person who knows what she wants, but also knows how to treat other people. Whereas Gaston is entirely the opposite of that, is regarded as a bit of a chump, a bit of a self-obsessed fool, really. So we can play with that. It's about making the characters recognizable, but without belittling them in any way more than we have to, or the story does already, really. And as I mentioned earlier on, alongside the central story arc of tales like Mother Goose, which is another slightly less well-known story, where the beast in this instance is the one that you desperately want to turn his ways, change his ways, actually, so that the story, the love story within the tale can actually come to fruition. You've got a strange set of feelings towards him. You love him, you hate him, but ultimately you know that he and Belle will be absolutely perfect for each other, because they're both strong people with an accessibility and a love for each other.
I tell you what, we've pretty much covered everything to do with this, but the countdown to the next Panto season is already underway, Liam. How excited are you? I know it's only early in the year, but it comes up really quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I'm very excited about it. As I said, it's great to be back working with Imagine and having that accessibility, and to be able to co-write it and co-direct it with Eric is brilliant, because we both kind of understand panto, certainly Scottish panto, and in the writing it's just brilliant. I'm very excited about it. I think it's great. I think we all know it's going to be here before you know it, even though we're still sitting in February, but I know that it's still going to be here before you know it, because we're constantly thinking about it. Even during this, I'm sitting making notes, listening to what Eric's saying, going, oh, that's interesting, what about this and what about this, and you look through your phone and your notebook and you think, oh, that's all interesting. Even during last year's panto, when you're talking about different things. And what I love is you go, oh, we don't have time for that this year, or, we'll put it in next year, or we'll save this or save that for another time. But yeah, I am very, very excited to be back, to be doing Beauty and the Beast at the Pavilion.
How many scripts are you writing this year, Eric?
I think at the moment it's 8. I think I'm going to try and cap it at 8 as well. And can I just say, for those listening, that what people may well be thinking, well, what the heck does he know about Scottish panto? Why has he been asked to write that? Well, as Liam knows, deep inside, and if I were to use my native accent, I would be speaking like a wee boy from Ayrshire, a town called Irvine over on the west coast, because I am, in fact, native Scots and was brought up in panto and Kilmarnock and Ayr and the Pavilion and the Kings in Glasgow. But I have, as my daughters used to call it, my work voice, which unless I'm in Scotland, I tend to use my work voice. So that's why.
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. I can't wait for the next Panto season. I know you can't either. Liam Dolan and Eric Potts, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much.
Well, before we finish this episode, another of your questions, and this one is an interesting one, asking how we get celebrities into Imagine Pantos. Well, who better to answer that question than head of celebrity casting at Imagine Theatre, Laura Taylor?
There's no one simple answer to that. It's a combination of different factors. Sometimes an agent will suggest a client list they have of people who are available and interested in doing panto this particular year. Sometimes we get a wish list from the theatre team. So we start approaching those names to see if they would be available and interested. Sometimes we create our own wish list of people that we would love to work with or think would be perfect for a certain role. Or sometimes there's really random things that happen, like last year when Scott Mills announced on air that he would like to do panto. He'd never done it before, and he said, maybe I'll do it in somewhere like Leicester. I happened to be listening. We produced the panto in Leicester, so got straight on to his agent. And last year he appeared in panto at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester. So there's some really weird and wonderful ways that celebs end up in panto, and that's what keeps it interesting and exciting.
Laura, thank you so much. Now, don't forget to keep those questions coming in, and make sure you join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 73, when I'll be catching up with Kev Johns MBE, who will mark his 30th year in panto and his 24th at the Swansea Grand this Christmas in Jack and the Beanstalk.
Thank Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.